Hello, everybody. I'll start with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the city of Fernie is located within Kukinamakis, the unceded territory of Yakutat-Nucleat First Nation. We recognize that we live and work within their vast lands. Akanahunik are from Yakutat-Nucleat and are members of the Ktunaxa-speaking peoples of British Columbia, Idaho, and Montana. I would like to welcome a new member of the table here, Sophia Becker. Just hi, everybody. And with that, we'll call this to order. I'd like to add a late item, if I can get a mover for that. Councillor Hamilton, and a seconder. All in favor? Okay. The item 14.2, request for the support Wild Wapiti Play School Society is on the agenda. I'll do that a little backwards. But, all right. And we'll start as usual with opening the floor to public participation. I now invite the public in attendance or participating electronically who wish to comment on items listed on the meeting agenda in accordance with section 3.7.3 of the procedure bylaw to address council. Except speakers must not address council regarding a matter for which a public hearing must be held or has been held pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to the council's consideration of the matter or adoption of the bylaw. Speakers must not address council regarding a bylaw for which section 464 of the Local Government Act prohibits a public hearing. Speakers must not address council regarding a permit for which public notice must be given or has been given pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of issuance of the permit. A speaker may only address the council for a maximum of 3 minutes. In addition to all that, please note that in this public input period, speakers must not make comments in respect to item 10.1 as section 464 of the Local Government Act prohibits council from holding a public hearing for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. And with that, do we have anybody who would like to take the floor? Go ahead.
Thank you. To the 10.1 that you were just speaking about, could you give us a little more detail? I actually came partially to oppose the zoning. Could you explain what our options are for discussing those matters for myself as well as for anyone that's watching this?
That's a really good question. That's a provincial rule. Could I lean on corporate officer Daniel?
It's section 467 of the Local Government Act, which this bylaw we are prohibited from holding a public hearing. I would lean on our planning department for a more fulsome explanation of.
I would just love to know what our options are, myself as well as the community, to talk about it and oppose it before council votes on it.
Thank you, Your Worship. Simple answer is that there are no options to oppose the bylaw through public means. Again, the public hearing is prohibited in section 464 of the Local Government Act. Essentially, there's 4 points or 4 criteria that the Local Government Act has us look at. One is that there's an official community plan in effect for the area, which there is. The other is that the bylaw is consistent with that official community plan, which it is. The other is that the sole purpose of the bylaw is to prevent development that is in whole or in part a residential development, which it is. And lastly, that residential component accounts for at least half of the gross floor area of the buildings that are going to be built as a result of rezoning, which it will be. So those are the 4 criteria. Again, I know that council has in the past welcomed public input, whether it be in favor or in opposition of an application. But this legislation does tie council's hands and our hands in that respect.
Thank you, Mr. Similini. Is there any non-10.1? Oh, go ahead, Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I understand that the legislation prevents us from having a public hearing, but I don't think the legislation prevents us from receiving public input. I don't think there's anything in the legislation that prevents, someone could write us a letter. We're not going to throw the letter in the garbage. We're going to receive it, right?
That's a very good point.
So I just want to, we should maybe take a breath here because there's a difference between a public hearing, which has an established protocol and when we receive input and what happens after, et cetera, et cetera. Public input is not a public hearing. Public input we've received, here's public input right here. Just the fact that it doesn't have anything to do with the land thing is irrelevant. We receive public input about everything. This is not a public hearing. We're not having a public hearing. So I question, and I would encourage perhaps the corporate officer to have a closer look at the information before we turn down the opportunity for public input on this.
Very good point, Councillor McIsaac. My knee jerk is to hear all input, as long as it's new and cogent. However, I do worry about running afoul of provincial rules. Corporate Officer Daniel.
Sorry, just gonna pull this closer so I'm not bending over. Thank you, Your Worship. Through Your Worship to all of council, the reasoning behind not allowing anyone to speak to item 10.1 in the public input period is because not all communities have a public input period on their council agenda. And what we want to do is prevent a de facto public hearing from happening when we have not announced it. It's not well known to everyone in the community that this is our opportunity to come speak. I appreciate and agree that we do need to carefully look at this. I am in fact working on some updates to our procedure bylaw so we can take into account these new legislative rules and ensuring that we have clear information on our website for the public. So when they have questions similar to Mr. Weebs, we are able to provide clear answers.
Thank you. I think we'll talk about 10.1 then when we get there. We all have some letters in our inboxes about that. So moving on to item 9, we have, or actually, is there any public participation or input that is not related to 10.1? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, no worries.
So once you get to 10.1, will there be any opportunity for the public to talk then?
No, not at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I wish we could help you out a little more. All right, anyone else with anything else? Is there anybody online, Ms. Rhodes? Okay, moving on with item 9. We have a presentation from the Elk Valley Regional Land Trust. I believe, yeah, go ahead, take the floor.
I am the executive director of the Elk Valley Regional Land Trust. The trust is a BC not-for-profit. It's a federally registered charity. Its directors consist of representatives from various of the conservation and sustainable recreational use communities in town. That would include Fernie Trails Alliance, Coal Creek Heritage Society, Alberta Alliance, Wild Site, Fernie Hiking Ski Touring Club. The board also consists of 6 legacy directors who provide professional input there, lawyers, accountants, businessmen. I'm really here because the objective of the trust is to acquire lands or interests in lands in the Fernie area for 3 things: sustainable recreation, conservation, and wildlife connectivity. Those are the objectives that the various organizations have united to try to pursue. I'm here today because an opportunity has arisen for the trust to acquire, for the benefit of the community, 258 acres that we all know as the Alpine lands or the EK lands. Acquiring that property will support the recreational trails that are on it. And those trails are quite important. So you'll see from the map above you and in the materials that are provided, on the Alpine Trails land sit three of probably the most important trails in that quadrant of the city. There's the Mount Fernie Trail for about 1.7 kilometers, I believe. There's the Fairy Creek Falls Trail. There's the Mount Proctor Access Trail, both for hiking and for biking. All of these are on private land, all owned by Alpine Trail. When I first started working in the trail system 20 years ago, my minor contribution at that time was to provide land use agreements. And I had to keep emphasizing to the members of the board of that organization that these were just agreements. They were standalone agreements. They were rights of use. They could disappear at any time. They were not guarantees by any stretch of the imagination that these trails could continue going forward. They can always be the landowner can sell, the landowner can do whatever the landowner can do, and the rights in respect to the trails at that point are gone, as is the capital investment, right? And that's important infrastructure for the tourism industry in the community. These are all heavily traveled, heavily used trails. Acquiring the property also provides a key element in a broader proposal, which is to establish a connectivity corridor on the west slope of the city, running from about Far to about Alpine Trails. You'll see a map in the materials provided before you now. The EK lands stand at the north. They anchor the north. They provide an important connectivity point between the Fairy Creek watershed, very important, and the Elk Valley itself. This zone will do many things. One of the things it will do, if it comes to pass, will be to create a zone for the better management of wildlife, human life interaction, something that's been a problem for all of us for many years. It'll also, as I say, provide, most importantly, a north-south corridor for animals to effectively bypass. So those are two of the things that the proposal before you will do. Now for the ask. The acquisition price of that land is $7.6 million. The trust has already raised $2.6 million from various sources, primarily from the federal government and from the seller itself, who's prepared to make a donation back to acquire those lands. We're in the middle of a conversation with a senior conservancy, which I'll leave unidentified, which is prepared to contribute up to $3.6 million to the acquisition price of the land. But that senior conservancy came back with a question. And the question is, what's the local buy-in? What's Fernie prepared to do to make this a reality? I thought that was an important question. I had an opportunity to meet with city staff in a preliminary way to see whether there wasn't something that might be done. What might be available to council if council is minded to support this matter of proposal? What might it be available? What might be available for it to do? As a result of that, we came up with some points of discussion. Two things are available to the city. First, the city has existing a reserve fund of $350,000, current real dollars in reserve, which you can use for the acquisition of parks. including linear parks. Trails spread over a distance constitute linear parks. So there is an existing fund of money available, which could be applied to this purpose. The second thing that the municipality has by way of ability is an ability to waive property tax, which for a land trust is a very important thing. Because as a land trust, when we acquire a piece of land for community purposes, we can only acquire it if we have at the same time a stewardship fund, which is large enough to cover the cost, the reasonably anticipated costs of owning that land in perpetuity. So when we acquire a piece of land, it's not only the money to acquire the land, it's the extra $500,000 or $1 million that's acquired to set up the fund that'll kick off the interest that's sufficient to meet the cost of running the land going forward. A waiver of property taxes substantially reduces the amount of stewardship fund that we have to have in reserve to manage the lands going forward. So that's two things then that the city has within its capacity to assist this initiative if the council considers it the kind of initiative it wants to assist. That led to this discussion of what would this kind of deal look like? What are the things that council would have to consider in determining whether or not to provide this assistance? So the basic idea would be this. The trust will acquire the lands. Fee simple, becomes the owner of the lands, plain and simple. It's required to conserve, preserve, and maintain them in perpetuity, forever. For conservation, for sustainable use of those trails, and for wildlife connectivity. Now, the deal that we're discussing, if there ever is a deal, the first element would be a waiver of the property tax for whatever period is available and convenient to the city. Generally, waivers, I think, endure for a period of several years, but they're not in perpetuity themselves. Council can always return to the question of whether the waiver is appropriate in given circumstances. The second thing that the city could do is actually dispense funds from the Parks Reserve to acquire the trails themselves as linear parks. So the thinking here is that the city would buy from the trust on the date that the transaction closes, the Mount Fernie Trail, the Ferry Creek Falls Trail, the Mount Proctor Access Trails.
You're close to time.
Yep. And the city would then enter an agreement with the trust, an agreement back, if you will, for the management of those lands going forward. And it would pay a small fee in order to assist with the management of those trails going forward. That's the substance of the proposal. The only question I have for council today is really looking for a mandate to negotiate. We'd like to sit down with council or sit down with staff over the course of the next month. See if we can't arrive at something that city staff would find constitutes a reasonable recommendation, and then come back to council within a month. The reason for the month is this. If this transaction does not close by January 17th, it's dead. We lose the federal funding. And that is the substance of my request. Really just asking for a mandate to negotiate and return.
Thank you, Mr. LaRoche. Thoughts or questions from council? Go ahead, Councilor Nadia Keller.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Worship. Mr. LaRoche, can I just ask a few questions if you don't
Please.
mind? Your large unnamed conservancy, will there be strings attached to their donation, or who will retain the control? Like, will your group retain control?
The trust will be the owner.
Okay, so that trust will control access.
Exactly.
Can you sort of define to me what sustainable recreational use means to the trust?
So for us, sustainable recreational use means any existing use of the land, historically, for which it has been used. We operate on one principle, and the principle is that if, but I can't imagine this happening, but conceivably it could, If a sustainable use comes in conflict with a conservation value, an important conservation value, then the rule is we bring in the experts. The experts look at the conflict, determine what the alternatives are, make the recommendation, and the trust that acts on the recommendation. The beauty about the trust is it's composed of members of the community. When I say we're acquiring it for the community, we are acquiring it for the community. We're a trust, but we're composed entirely of organizations and individuals who reside within the community. So the decision would be made at that point. If someone wanted to propose a new use, happy to listen to it. But let's see the scientific evidence first to make sure that that proposed use fits within the values generally of the trust, and whether the use can be, in fact, sustained. Is that helpful?
It is. Thank you. Follow up, Your Worship.
Yeah.
So the trust is sort of the determining party
Mhm.
about access. So like current private landowners could also shut access down?
Unquestionably, on a moment's notice. Private owners could, yes. Private owners are motivated by private interests. We've done very well by private owners. Let's be truthful over the years. We've had a great deal of cooperation, but private owners change. And when someone new arrives on the board, the use of a particular trail may not be in their specific interest. They can close it on a moment's notice in virtually every case that I'm aware of. In our case, as the organizational imperative is to ensure sustainable use. We're here to acquire trails so that they could be used forever. So we're not in the business of closing trails down. That's not part of our objective. It's not part of our mandate. It's not part of what we can or will do.
Further questions from council? Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you. I'm curious, and I know this is probably getting into a bit more the details of the negotiations, but given that some of those biking trails on that land and even the hiking trails have some fairly risky, we'll put it, sections, who takes on liability in those situations for those trails, and how is that?
Well, that's really quite interesting, actually. There used to be in common law occupiers liability, and occupiers liability, in fact, became a statutory form of liability. And you could be liable if someone injured themselves on your property in particular sets of circumstances, if you were negligent or grossly negligent or whatever. But that law has now gone by the boards. When the nation proposed the Trans-Canada Trail, a lot of property owners were saying, no, thank you very much. Don't want the Trans-Canada Trail on my property because of occupiers liability. So the legislatures have stepped in and said occupiers liability is no longer a thing, if you will. And so as a lawyer myself, a retired lawyer, I can imagine really exceptional circumstances where if the trust is there, if the city is the owner of the trails and they invite people onto the lands and there is for some dangerous competition and they don't take the appropriate steps or concern, I could see liability arise in that, but that's a one-off. In the ordinary course, there is no occupiers liability anymore. And the city, of course, has its own insurance policies were that ever to arise. But it's an interesting question and one that I would pursue with city staff to make sure that it's covered off.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Nixon?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Shoesmith. Just curious. First off, congratulations. That's a major achievement in getting that amount of money. That's quite something.
It's like herding cats.
What's that?
It's like herding cats.
and now you're in front of the poor municipal government here.
The least of all cats, I hope.
I'm just curious, maybe this question is for our CFO. How much tax revenue do we currently get from that piece of property right now? That I'm just curious about that.
Last year was 9,600. And we'll talk about this later during our exemption presentation, but just a reminder to council that that cost would be made up by every other property in the city if we were to grant an exemption for this owner.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon. Further questions, comments? Discussion? Councillor Hamilton?
What would we need here now to move this forward from a staff direction perspective? Do we need a resolution?
I would think we'd need to direct staff to continue with engaging. Corporate Officer Daniel?
Yes, we would ask for a resolution with council's wishes for staff and this particular project.
Councillor McIsaac?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Before we get to the resolution, if we may, I would like to get some feedback from staff with regards to this particular request would require staff time for negotiating and so on. We're heading into budget season. Their timeline is January. That seems very short. So I wouldn't mind hearing some feedback whether or not staff believe that we have the capacity to take this on, or they have the capacity to take this on, should we be so resolved.
Through to council, I think we generally do. We have a good idea of what the trust is asking. We know how to procure lands, like a purchase agreement is quite straightforward. It's essentially negotiating on price and which specific elements of the lands. And we have met and discussed this and other potentials a number of times. And since our last meeting, staff have generally been considering focusing the procurement on a swath around Ferry Creek and the Ferry Creek trails and lookouts, because it creates a more stable single footprint for a park while still being somewhat linear. Whereas some of the other trails, may experience seasonal landslides or need a reroute, and then you run into trouble having to amend land swaps or adjust a trail for a reroute that might poke out of a corridor that the city actually owns. So generally our recommendation would be to try and, I think, consolidate things a bit. But I don't think it's unmanageable. In essence, we would be looking for a fair valuation for those lands and then bring that information back to council for consideration by way of a report before the end of the year so that council could consider it.
Thank you, CAO. Councillor McIsaac?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. One further question. This might be for the CFO. Should this land become park and so designated as opposed to the current zoning situation? With regards to permissive tax exemption, I'm wondering, and perhaps Director Burdick can answer this question, do we currently tax non-city owned parks in the city right now? Like, because normally we tax residential, commercial property and so on, but if it's a park property, do we tax it?
Thanks, Councillor McIsaac. Do you have an example off the top of your head?
Oh, if I did, I would have brought it up.
I'll speak up again in a minute or two if I can find one. Yeah.
Leaves me wondering if we have any of those.
I don't know. Actually, I thought at one time that there was a portion that was over near the West Fernie Beaver Dam that was owned, but I could be wrong.
Go ahead, Director Lennox.
Deputy Mayor to Councillor McIsaac, there is private park at the south end of Riverside, just below that detention pond, right along the Elk River. So that's the only private park area that comes to mind for myself.
So I'll try to find that one, and it'll just take me a minute or two to look it up.
Okay, take your time.
There's one more at by Eager Landis property as well, in Alpine Trails, just west of Burma Road.
Yes. Do that.
And just to follow up, Deputy Mayor, the reason I asked that question is because if this process were to go through and that becomes park, well, we wouldn't actually have, if we're not taxing private park, we wouldn't require a permissive tax exemption. We wouldn't be taxing it, or it'd be considerably lower than the residential tax.
That's a cogent question. Thank you. In the interim, does anybody have any thoughts while Bryn looks this up? Go ahead, Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just curious about the money that Mr. LaRoche had mentioned. Do we have any plans for that reserve fund off the top of our heads right now?
Thanks, Councillor Nixon. No, there's nothing in the 5-year plans with that specific reserve fund in mind. And speaking to the history of it, I only looked back to the last 5 years from when I started, and it's been there since then. And we haven't, and it's just grown. When I started in 2021, it was at 325,000, and it's just grown from interest. We haven't consciously contributed anything to it or discussed a plan with it with council yet.
Councillor McIsaac.
No, thanks, Deputy Mayor. Just out of curiosity, is that reserved solely for the acquisition of parks, or is it improvement or other various uses?
Yeah, Deputy Mayor, again, through to Councillor McIsaac, under the Local Government Act, it's exclusively for the acquisition of park land only and not for purchasing like infrastructure for parks.
CAO.
If I may, council could consider their parkland acquisition fund their most restricted reserve. You can only use it to buy more parkland. Can't use it for improvements or maintenance or enhancements to anything else. And typically there are reserves that you hold for when there is a development where you need to, based on long-term master plans, acquire parkland that isn't going to be dedicated by a developer or through subdivision, or in a future growth area where you think you may want to acquire that parkland.
Thank you, CAO. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. The last comment actually dovetails perfectly with my question of, do we have anything else, quote unquote, on the radar that those funds might be needed for?
Through to council, Director Lennox may have additional comments. I've had a look through our Parks and Recreation Master Plan and OCP and don't note any where we have a highlight around private land that we know will be developed where sufficient parkland wouldn't be anticipated to be dedicated or where we wouldn't be seeking cash in lieu of said dedication. So the short answer is not to my knowledge. Thank you.
All right, if there's anything further from council. I believe we had a motion, did we not? No.
Your worship, I have prepared a motion if council would like to hear.
Please.
That council directs staff to meet with the Elk Valley Land Trust regarding the proposed West Slope project and bring back a report to council before the end of the year.
Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Nixon. Discussion. Go ahead, CFO.
Thanks. The two properties that the planning department brought up, they're not as simple as just being a private park. They're split zoned in the planning software, but in BC assessment, they're kind of combined into one big zone of land. So it's not super clear what the answer is at the moment, but we can try and track down more later.
Thank you. All right, back to where we were. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Moving forward.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you. We are at item 10, correct? Or did I miss something? Oh, sorry, I missed Mr. Wiebe. My apologies. Not trying to railroad you off the floor here.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, councilors, thank you so much for having me. I never introduced myself earlier. My name is Chad Weeb. I'm a resident of Montaigne in Fernie here. When I first put this, request to appear before council, it's actually for a pathway. So I was thinking at first that I wanted to do a nice pathway, park bench in an area that was designated for a pathway, but then one was never built. As I spoke with the community and the residents of Montaigne more and more, what I found out was there's quite a desire for a playground in the area, and kind of I guess switched gears and kind of got excited about potentially building a playground. So that's why I'm here tonight to propose building a playground on city-owned dedicated parkland. So I'll go through here. So why is a playground needed? Well, Montaigne currently doesn't have a playground. As far as I've seen, there's no plans for a playground in the area. There is a ton of families with young children in Montaigne, from toddlers to teenagers and everything in between. There is just, there's a lot of big families in that neighborhood, and the ones that I spoke with would love to have a playground close to home, a safe place for the kids to be able to walk and go and play. More options for kids to stay physically active, always going to be fantastic for the community as a whole. So the location, so you can see in the photo there, it is on Piedmont Drive. It is on city-owned dedicated parkland space. I have confirmed with the planning department that there is no restrictions currently on that property. So it was intended for a pathway, but it does dead end. So a park actually would probably be a playground would probably be the best bet for that space. This is just off of BC assessment showing exactly where it is. So the size of that city-owned parkland is about 20 feet wide and about 90 feet long. So plenty of room. Options are basically endless with a space like that. I think there's a lot of really cool things that could be done in that area. Potentially even something like an obstacle course, low to the ground, something that's we're not going to have liability issues and things like that. But speaking with the community, something like the playground at the dike that was built in the annex park there, something out of timber, something that's going to be really low maintenance for the city going forward. So my proposal, I'm offering to manage the entirety of the project from start to finish, as well as I'm offering to fully fund the project from the dirt work to the equipment. I would love to work closely with Director Brett Logan to find something that's going to suit that area, something that the town is going to be agreeable to, and go from there. I met with CEO Mike last week, and he was nice enough to send me the council's strategic plan, and I went through that and some of the areas where this playground could tie in very closely to the strategic plan. Quality of life, leveraging the existing city shared service agreements and partnerships. That's pretty much spot on. This land is currently sitting there, not being used. It's not really accessible. There's no kind of access to it. So I would love to partner with the city to get something like that done. Livable community, so ensuring citizens can flourish in an inclusive, diverse community with sustainable infrastructure, amenities, and services. An amenity like a playground would be a huge benefit to the city of Fernie, as well as the area of Montaigne. Complete neighborhoods, reducing average travel distance from residential neighborhoods to amenities and services. So kids or parents can have their children just go down the street to play in the park. Probably like a lot of us had as kids. I think that could be pretty exciting. So what do I want from the city? I'm just hoping to get everyone else excited about it like I am, and a lot of the community in Montana is to have a playground for their kids. And I would love to take care of the rest while working with the city for plans and making sure we're all on the same page. So that's it. I would love to take some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wiebe. Questions from council? I pronounced your name right, yes?
Pardon me?
I got your name right,
Wiebe.
yes?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Chad Wiebe.
oh, thank you, yeah. Sometimes I don't pronounce things. Questions? Councillor McIsaac?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I'm curious about one thing. In the map, what Mr. Wiebe had said that it dead ends. What does that mean? Like, is there like a drop off? Is there?
No,
Like, it just looks like there's woods and a trail. So I'm just curious.
So I'll go back. So down there is I guess a hill goes down and back towards the top left-hand corner. That's where the Montaigne barn would be. So in the original master plan that Montaigne had put forward, there was a trail that actually went through there and carried on. But for whatever reason, they decided to stop it there. When you look actually just below where I have the rectangle, that is currently a paved path. But that section was just not finished. Maybe because it dead ends there. But either way, I see that as a huge bonus and a good spot for a playground at this point.
All right, if I may ask a question of planning here. What's the history with that piece of land, Director Lennox, if I may? What's its current, like, what's going on with it other than, like, is there anything?
Yeah, it's a vacant strip right now. The history was in 2015. There was a subdivision that created the parent parcel, I believe, for phases 1 and 2 of Montaigne, and dedicated 3 strips of linear parkland for trail purposes, which was consistent with the official community plan criteria for the approving officer accepting a dedicated park. So there was, moving back further, a conscious decision between the city and the developer, I think over 10 years ago, that we would pivot from the golf-based recreation there and have a linear parkway system. So there was an effort through the subdivisions that came forward to have linear parkland dedicated, and this is a remnant of that. The intent, as I recall, was that north of this phases 1, 3, 2, 3, there's well, it's part of the rezoning tonight. There's the cottages in townhouse development, and that this would provide an opportunity for those folks once that area is developed to access south into the Montaigne development proper. I was talking to the developer recently, and subsequent, obviously, to 15, there's been some more analysis. As Mr. Wiebe mentioned, this is on a terrace, it drops down. There is a bit of a geotech concern there, actually. So there may be further investigation whether that could be viable for a trail connection to that private development that I was mentioning.
Thank you, Director Lennox. Councillor Audia Kelly.
Thanks, your Deputy Worship. Director Lennox or Manager Similini, don't go away. In light of the fact that we have a comprehensive development before us tonight, how would this impact that overall plan if that were to be put there? And also then, as an ancillary sort of thing, asset management comes to mind.
Deputy Mayor, through to council. part of that overall plan that you're going to see tonight is the zoning portion of it. Of course, there's no specific trail locations or anything in that part of the plan. However, the OCP section, which again, I'll elaborate a little bit on in the presentation, or just ruin the surprise now and tell you that we're planning on bringing that portion forward to the overall OCP process, does speak to development of an overall trails network and parks plan as part of that. So it may have an effect on that. I mean, if you're blocking off a potential trail corridor or something like that, like there's the potential that it sterilizes that section for trail.
Thank you, Manager Similini.
CAO.
If I could, to council's question about asset management, I think council may recall that asset management and sustainable service delivery kind of go together. And in terms of our playgrounds and parklands, specifically to parklands, we do train park inspectors and do have trained and training in and formal requirements for inspection and maintenance to national standards, so CSA standards. So when we take on new playgrounds, typically they are stamped, and we have assurances that the design and the manufacturer meet standards, and then also that the installation meets standards. And then there's a prescribed inspection and maintenance standard that we need to adhere to. And our parks maintenance personnel have training and certification in that. You might be thinking, well, we have some really old playgrounds, and we do. We have some that were constructed before there were those requirements, but for new playgrounds that we take on, we certainly do seek to have those professionally stamped, and we need those assurances so that we can then meet our obligations and requirements around inspection and maintenance to keep them safe moving forward. So it's a complicating factor, but it speaks directly to your question on asset management, because there will be, when a design, if a design does become known, there will be then a consideration of what are then annual inspection and maintenance obligations for it. And playgrounds are not, playgrounds are rather a bit unique there compared to, say, planter boxes and benches.
Thank you, CAO. Councillor Adia Kelly.
Thanks, your Deputy Worship. I was also the school that we know is going to be built. I'm going to assume it's going to have a playground as well. So I'm just wondering about interference with OCP development, school, if that's really prudent.
Councillor McIsaac.
I'm so live. Good thing I wasn't mumbling. I guess my comment, I hope we're never in the position where we're worried about having too many playgrounds. That as an inherent thing, they're just generally good. I guess where I'm at right now is, while the idea of a playground in a neighborhood that doesn't have one is a good thing, I'm happy to wait until after we've had the presentation on the rest of the plan and so on before moving forward on this particular item. I'd like to better and more complete information before we make any decisions.
Thank you, Councillor McIsaac. I tend to agree. Further thoughts from council? Trying to think, should we motion something about this or just proceed? Councillor Ramadaz?
I would say we proceed, Your Worship.
Yeah, thank you. Very good. All right. Thank you, Mr. Weep.
Okay, thank you for your time.
That brings us on to item number 10. We have a report from the manager of planning.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a moment while I get the presentation ready. It's been a while, apparently. I will just share my screen and get it started here. All right, there we go. Thank you for your patience, Council. Tonight we're discussing bylaw 2477, which is the long-awaited Montane overall zoning bylaw amendment. As usual, I'll try to keep my presentation as brief as possible and give lots of time to field questions and have some discussion. Quick background on this. I mean, as we all know, originally the Montane area was slated as a golf course development, and it's since shifted to more of a trail type development as far as outdoor recreation goes. There's still, I guess, relics of that golf course remaining in our bylaws and our OCP, and we've slowly been taking care of those things. And for what it's worth, the area has been developed sort of incrementally, and there never was a full plan moving forward after we moved away from the golf course. So back in 2021, the developer brought forward bylaw amendment application 2441 for the OCP and 2442 for the zoning. At that time, council had requested that we don't move forward at that time because they wanted to see a more overall picture of the entire area rather than the piecemeal zoning applications that had been sort of normal for the area. So at that time, council did move forward with bylaw for phase 5B, which was the next phase in the subdivision. And then we worked with the developer to bring forward the bylaw tonight. So essentially what it is we're dealing with this CD1 zone, which is the Comprehensive Development 1 zone. It's a rewrite of the entire zone. So the old zoning, our subzone titles have been removed and replaced with new ones. So what we see is some regulations first, general regulations, definitions that are exclusive to the zone. So those definitions are in the zoning bylaw, but they're exclusive to that section of the zoning bylaw. An overall purpose of the CD zone, and then a section on equivalent dwelling units. And what equivalent dwelling units means essentially is each different zone has a number of dwelling units in the density section. And equivalent dwelling units allow us to calculate how many dwelling units a different use is worth. So for example, a hotel room I think is worth 0.33 dwelling units. So 3 hotel rooms would equal 1 dwelling unit. So if you can have 4 dwelling units on a property, that would equal 12 hotel rooms. So that's sort of what the equivalent dwelling unit section does. And then 3 zones, which is quite simplified from the previous zoning. Community open space zone, which speaks to, again, I'll show you there's some maps coming up, but it speaks to the area in Coal Creek, similar to the area that we looked at in the previous presentation. It's privately owned, but accessible to the public. I think the main goal there is that's where a lot of the trail network is. Also, there's programming planned, thinking of the Montane Barn, for example, where there's public programming that may be planned in the future. It is an area for campground and as well as parks. The NMU zone or neighborhood mixed use zone, it's really, these are sort of where the commercial nodes would be throughout the development. Wide range of commercial. I mean, retail is pretty open-ended. Personal service, office. We look at food and beverage and tourist accommodation as well, and as well as childcare. What's really important with this zone, I think, is that there are multifamily dwellings as a permitted use. And what we expect to see there is lots of mixed use type multifamily dwelling where you would have commercial or another permitted use on the ground floor, and then dwelling units above. Could be in the form of employee housing, for example. And thirdly, the Montaigne residential zone. You've seen this zone before or something very close to it. It is the existing DR1 zone that was recently changed when we did the small scale multi-unit housing adoption for Montaigne. So essentially we had this application in front of us at that time. We pulled out what the zoning was because it was compliant with the small scale multi-unit housing legislation. We just applied the DR name to it, and then all of the existing DR zones had the new zoning regulations associated with them. So again, essentially what that is just as a review, small scale multi-unit housing allows for up to 4 dwelling units on a single family property. The zone boundaries, again, just like the zones themselves, the zone boundaries have gone through a pretty drastic change. On your left, you see the old or the existing zoning, and on your right, you see the proposed zoning. So again, COS or community open space is that Coal Creek, Brewery Creek area. And then there's the NMU sort of spread throughout the predominant MR zone throughout. It is worth noting as well that the applicant did come forward with the application for their lands, not for any private lands, privately owned. So for example, the lots that currently exist, those lands were rezoned when we did the small scale multi-unit housing zoning. They did undergo that change to comply to the SSMU legislation. So essentially what we've done here is the city has initiated that portion to ensure that the zone is called MR. So there's not a DR zone that no longer exists in the zoning, but it's still consistent with what was previously adopted. So as I noted earlier, the application that came through is a lot more than just a zoning application. It was really a foundation for an OCP amendment or a foundation for the policies that we can include and consider in our future OCP. Right now, the OCP language for the development area is consistent with what's being what's being asked, which is another reason for why we don't have a public hearing for this. But the policy framework that's being proposed is much more wholesome and will allow Montaigne to be developed in the future moving forward in a much more structured manner. And with that brings me to the recommendation. Right now, the recommendation is that council approve the application and that they give first, second, and third readings to the bylaw. I will note as well that if there are questions, and I'll try my best to answer, but if there are questions or concerns that council wants addressed outside of this meeting and brought forward to another meeting, that potentially we give first and second readings tonight and come back for third reading at a future meeting. Just gives us the opportunity to amend the bylaw if it does come up.
Thank you, Mr. Similini. Questions from council? Tracy Kelly.
Thanks, your deputy worship. I just want to go back to, and sorry for my previous question, taking away a bit of the surprise, Manager Similini, but you said all the criteria were met. In reading the report, my understanding is that this was the direction from council, which, as we know, is a continuing body. And I wanted to say kudos to staff for the clearly hard work that you've done on this to make it a more fulsome development project. So I just wanted to clarify that we are comfortable with it meeting OCP. I'm struggling for the word. Thank you. Moving forward.
Your worship, through to Councillor Audia Kelly, yes, the application as it is right now is consistent with the OCP. Typically, the way that we look at that consistency is we look at what that land use is or what the policies are in that area, and if it matches, then we say it is consistent with the OCP.
Thanks, Manager Simulini. If I may then, Your Worship,
Please.
I would like to move the staff recommendation that we approve the application and give it first, second, and third readings.
All right, there's a motion, Corporate Officer.
Hi, I'm just hoping we could break up those two resolutions into two separates, and first would be approval of the application.
Would you amend your motion then?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Ramadas? All right, discussion. Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you. I've got a couple questions, but I'll approach them one at a time. Just a quick clarification. When you were talking about the equivalent dwelling unit and, you know, a hotel room being 0.33 but this being a residentially zoned area, does the language there open up the potential that someone could conceivably build a 12-room rooming house in a residential zone and still be compliant?
Apologies, Your Worship, through to Councillor Hamilton. I should have clarified that when I spoke to equivalent dwelling units. The equivalent dwelling units are listed in the general regulations of the bylaw. The permitted uses are the permitted uses in each section of the bylaw. So what you would see is if you have a permitted use of, say, tourist accommodation or something along those lines, you would then apply the equivalent dwelling unit table to that. So, for example, the NMU or neighborhood mixed use zone for a density, sorry, I'll just bring it up here in front of me, says that it has a total density of 200 dwelling units per gross hectare. So what you would do is take that and say 200 times 3, that's 600 hotel rooms per gross hectare. So instead of listing all the individual uses and what those densities are, it just lists it by dwelling unit. So when you talk about the Montaigne residential zone being the predominant zone, you can only have those permitted uses in that zone. So if it says single family dwelling or small scale multi-unit housing, that is the permitted use. So you couldn't build a hotel in that zone, so to speak.
Thank you.
Councillor Ramadas? Oh, Councillor McIsaac.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I had several questions, but I want to stick with the tourist accommodation thing for a second. Does tourist accommodation in those areas include like purpose-built short-term rental, and would those be obligated to follow our current short-term rental rules, or would they have different designation?
Yeah, Your Worship, through to Councillor McIsaac. If it is a single family dwelling unit, for example, it would be obligated to meet our current short-term rental regulations.
Okay, all right.
Further discussion? Councillor McIsaac again.
This is a bit of a broad question, and it comes from the previous meeting that we had with regard, and this was mentioned earlier, with regarding the downzoning of the one particular area within Montaigne. And during the discussion of that downzoning, it was what council was presented with was that this particular area, which had been focused on multifamily dwellings, would probably be unsuitable for the construction of those types of dwellings there. In the course of that discussion, this whole fulsome plan was requested, but part of the idea in there is that that somewhere there would be dedicated multifamily dwellings again to replace this particular area that had been downzoned. So we would get back some areas. What I'm seeing in here now is in this DR1 zone is the opportunity for multifamily dwellings, but I don't see any requirements. So under the proposed plan right now, how much actual multifamily dwellings would have to be constructed by the developer? What is the minimum number?
Your worship, through to Councillor McIsaac, there is no obligation to construct a multifamily dwelling. But it should be noted that the previous zoning, which was the, I believe, MU2 zone or multi-unit 2 zone, as the property was zoned that if you wanted to build on it, that's what you had to build, but there was no obligation to build on it either.
Fair enough, but I guess what I'm asking for here is if you going through the application that was put forward, there are paragraph after paragraph of information regarding the necessity for a wide diversity of housing in Fernie. It is of no one sitting at this table should be shocked at the expression of need of diversity of housing. And yet what we're being presented with here is actually something that says, well, maybe there'll be some, but there's no requirement for it. How many multifamily dwellings have been built so far under within the Montaigne subdivision?
Your worship, I'm not sure the exact number. Director Lennox may have a better idea of townhomes and cottages, things like that. I mean, yeah.
Deputy Mayor to Councillor McIsaac, as I mentioned in my previous comments, we're reviewing a subdivision for some multifamily development in the form of townhouses and cottages north of phases 1 through 3. So that would be the first type of multifamily development in Montaigne, but that's the type of scale of multifamily that I would anticipate moving forward.
Thank you, Director Lennox. Further, Councillor McIsaac?
If I may, the other thing that I wanted to ask about, so again, knowing that we haven't had multifamily built and we definitely need multifamily and diversity, I'm pleased to hear that there is at least a plan for one right now. But one of the concerns that I have right now is it's expressed within the staff report that this will be there's potentially ongoing change to sort of lock in some of this in the future. But once the bylaw for this is passed, it doesn't, I could be wrong about this, but normally is it not the actual developer and property owner who comes back to request changes to the bylaw? It's rare that the city proposes new changes to a bylaw once it's for a subdivision zone, once it's in place. Is that correct?
Through to Councillor McIsaac, that is correct. I mean, obviously the shining example of us initiating that change is the small scale multi-unit housing zone, which was legislated, but very rarely do we move forward with something, rezoning somebody else's land. We can, but it's not something that we do often. Generally, if we see it, it's like a housekeeping type thing.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. So I guess where I'm at here, Deputy Mayor, the reason why I'm asking these questions is I'm a little bit reluctant to move forward with recommending this. This is the largest developable area inside the boundaries of the city right now. And there is no requirement for any development of any multifamily at all in this. And for any of us who've been to any of the conferences over the last 10 years, have heard that ensuring that multifamily developments get built it's not optional anymore. We need the diversity of housing. I don't know what houses run for in Montaigne right now. I'm guessing probably 1.4, $1.8 million. There's nothing affordable there. So if we're going to ensure that there's affordable housing in this huge development that's going on right next to us in our community, how are we going to ensure what language can we use, what communication should be given to the developer and back from them that to ensure that we're going to achieve the diversity and multifamily that's needed in our community?
Thank you, Councillor McIsaac. I'll say my piece after Councillor Audia Kelly.
Thanks, Your Deputy Worship. Manager Similini, can I prevail upon you to put up the zones and the permitted uses for me, if you don't mind? And I just wanted to make an observation that, yes, we do need multi-unit housing. I understand that the current project that we thought was going to move forward is on pause. And I'm not sure how we can obligate people to build particular things other than making zones with permitted uses like staff has done with the developer and recommended. But I also want to add, how do we move forward if we continually deny this? In 2021, it was asked that it become more comprehensive and not piecemeal. And it seems to me that the developer and the staff have worked hard to bring that forward. So are we going to say no and then go another 3 years, which then no housing gets done? So do we not, I don't know. I'm feeling that in reading the report, that the staff was quite confident that this was a good thing.
Yeah, your worship, through to Councillor Adia Kelly. Again, we are recommending approval based on the application and its consistency with the official community plan. It's also worth noting, I think that we're potentially, if the developer or whoever owns the land decides to not develop apartment buildings or townhouses, we are losing that built form. But we do have the small scale multi-unit housing, which doesn't necessarily mean that a giant house is going to be built on the lot. So that would be up to an individual property owner, which in itself is a potential affordability incentive, right? Where you could build 4 cottages on your property or something along those lines. It is important to note, though, again, that it's not that built form of, you know, an apartment block or townhouses. So that's again that missing piece.
Thank you, Manager Similini. I'll use that segue actually to carry on the point I would like to add to this discussion. As somebody who builds houses and is a landlord, I see really a lot of people enjoy having a carriage house, cottage, basement suite, loft suite, any of the above. And I think shoehorning everything into one prescribed usage inherently is limiting. Whereas having this proposed zoning here, where you can build anything from your house to several units on the same lot, as I understand it, allows many, many people to make many, many small bets as opposed to large bets. And I think that inherently provides more diversity by dint of allowing people to dial up or down their density as they see fit. And this sounds weird coming from somebody who's ran for council, but I tend not to like being very prescriptive with what people do myself. Councillor Ramadas and then Hamilton.
Strong tone principle.
Very much, yes, thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. I'm curious in the agenda item 9.1 around the wildlife corridors. If you look at the maps in that presentation, a large portion of this, I guess we call it the eastern side of the valley, is grizzly bear migratory lands. And I'm curious what consideration in this development of these lands has been given to those animal migration routes.
Your worship, through to Councillor Hamilton. At this point with the zoning, it's not included in the zoning portion. However, moving forward in the OCP policy portion, there's potential there to talk about those types of issues, not only wildlife corridor, but just all of the issues of a community.
Thank you. Councillor Adia Kelly.
Thanks, Your Deputy Worship. So Manager Similini, the permitted uses, I think you've made quite clear for us that each zone has its own permitted uses, but would it, we're talking about more multi-unit housing, but realistically, approving this could mean, I mean, there could be no development at all. We could approve it and nothing could get built. Like, we can't compel, what I'm saying is we can't compel anyone to build anything really.
Yeah, Your worship, through to Councillor Adia Kelly, that's correct.
All right, does anybody have anything really new to add? There is a motion on the floor, and before I call the question, I would ask corporate officer to read that motion.
That council approve the application to amend section 4.2.18 comprehensive development 1 zone of zoning bylaw number 1750, 1998.
All right, those in favor? Those opposed? Noted. Moving forward, we have the next recommendation.
Would you like me to read it?
Yes, please.
That zoning bylaw number 1750, amendment bylaw number 2477, 2024 be given first, second, and third readings.
Fresh discussion on the new recommendation or mover? Councillor Audia Kelly, you're moving that?
Moving.
A seconder? Councillor Ramadas? Discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. In kind of keeping with Councillor McIsaac's earlier question about requiring something in the language of this new zoning, I guess my question is, what mechanism might exist for us to add language that a certain, and I don't know, is it a percentage, or for every single family unit that's sold, something multifamily needs to get sold? Like, is there a mechanism that we can implement into the bylaw and into the zoning to require that?
Yeah, Your Worship, through to Councillor Hamilton. I think that rather than to answer that question from a zoning perspective, I'm not sure, but keeping in mind that the properties at some point are going to need to be subdivided as well, that there may be something from a subdivision perspective. Director Lennox, is there any sort of language that you're aware of? Is that, if that's something you'd like us to come back with, we can look into it.
If I may, my thought on that one, just as somebody who's been through this process, and no offense to our wonderful staff here, but navigating through a web of agreements to get to a build won't increase the amount of building. It'll, if anything, discourage it. It's just further webbing and barriers to entry and expenditure of our staff's time. That's my opinion, but yeah, so with that, we have a mover and a seconder. Further discussion? Councillor Nixon.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I hear what Councillor McIsaac is saying about the multifamily dwellings, and I do remember sitting at this table in regards to that, and there was a promise, or not a promise, but a requirement. I guess we tried to get that in there. I'm just curious about this, the neighborhood mixed use, and under the permitted uses, is there not multifamily dwellings in the neighborhood mixed use as well?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't cover the other areas. The small scale multi-unit housing, hopefully, if Bill 44 still stands, should be, if we don't get a conservative government, if it's still there, hopefully that will still be in there as well. But is it not multifamily dwellings and the mixed use? Sorry to ramble on there.
No. Through to Councillor Nixon, that's correct. So multifamily dwellings is a permitted use on its own in that zone. So if you wanted to build multifamily housing and not have commercial, for example, associated with it, but again, to Councillor McIsaac's point, there's nothing that actually makes the developer build that, right? But again, a prime example is what Director Lennox alluded to earlier. The proposed townhouse development will be in that zone, I believe. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Ramadas.
Just curious how many units there are in that application there.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Ramos, just for clarification, how many units will be built? That's unknown at this time. I mean, it's such a large piece of land to be done in phases, but Oh, the townhouse. Oh, sorry. Director Lennox can comment on that. Yeah. Sorry, no, that's okay. It's an ongoing subdivision application. 30? Yeah, around 30. Yeah.
All right. I think everybody's had their say on this issue. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Noted. Awesome. Let's continue plowing forward with 10.2, report from the Director of Finance.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Shoesmith. Good evening, Council. I intend to present to you tonight on what exactly is a permissive tax exemption, and then to summarize the applications that we've received this year. So first, what is a permissive tax exemption, or PTE? PTE is a tool that's defined in the community charter that's available to council to help support organizations dedicated to enhancing quality of life for Fernie citizens by granting property tax exemptions for facility and property that these organizations operate out of. And so the proposed bylaw amendment before you tonight is for the 2025 taxation year and must be submitted to BC assessment by the end of October in order to take effect for next year. Our current PTE bylaw is in effect until 2025. Typically, these bylaws are done in 10-year parcels. And so the bylaw was created in 2015 and is good for 10 years. And staff is recommending tonight, again, an amendment to that bylaw. We received 5 applications this year, 2 from the Elk Valley Family Society, the daycare pilot, and the old fire hall parcel. With respect to the old fire hall, the exemption on this property will have to change over time because currently the plans there are to have some commercial property, which would not be exempt when that's finished. The Fernie District and Arts Council applied to have the remainder of their building, which used to be sublet for restaurant use, to be exempted. The Fernie Heritage Trust Society operates the Knox, the old Knox Church, which is a public concert venue on 2nd Ave. And lastly, Holy Family Parish, or in other words, the Catholic Church. Most of their property is already exempt, but this is for the community garden behind the church. BC Assessment recently reclassed this property as a commercial property. I don't really know why they did that, but as a result, the Catholic Church was hit with a fairly large tax bill. And it's kind of a challenge with this whole process because it is ultimately the property owner's responsibility to review your assessment notices and then appeal if you think it's wrong. But often when it's volunteers, those small changes can be missed. And so they've applied for to renew their property tax exemption on the community garden this year. And so using an estimate of 2024 assessment values and tax rates, this proposed amendment amounts to approximately just under $42,000 in municipal tax. And as I said earlier tonight, that's not a loss of revenue for the city, but it's a decision by council to then be covered by the rest of the properties in the city. And staff has reviewed these applications and they are quite extensive. All that I publish is just the 4-page application form, but they have to submit many other documents like financials and whatnot that it's just really for staff's vetting purposes. They don't get published, but and staff believes they are in alignment with OCP as well as council strategic plans. And so therefore our recommendation is to give initial readings to this bylaw. Thank you.
Questions from council? Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The one question I had, it's possible I might have another one, but the one I have right now is with regards to the Fernie Judo Club, because it looks like the address is still the basement of the curling thing, or that's where it was. Are they still active there? They haven't used that for several years, have they? And I'm just wondering if that tax exemption is still necessary.
So No, they haven't used that space, but that space ultimately is the property of the city of Fernie anyway. So most of our buildings are typically exempt. If that ever was leased out to some commercial use, then we would look at removing it. And I suppose the name should be changed to just City of Fernie on our bylaw. But I remember you now asking about this last year, and so I apologize I missed that again. But
Okay. And just for the record, I'll ask again next year. If it comes
thank
up.
you.
Councillor McIsaac and then Councillor Hamilton. Or sorry, Councillor Ramadas. Very tired.
Thanks, Your Worship. CFO, you got to educate me a little better on this. What exactly do you mean by, so this land, let's say the family parish, for example, if we put them in tax exempt, would they not be paying property taxes for the next year?
That's correct. They would not be. But the city still has to balance its budget. So we have to recoup that money that they are no longer paying from other sources, which, generally would be other taxpayers. So it's a decision by council that this particular property is a benefit to the community enough to grant that exemption.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Kind of in line with Councillor McIsaac's question, I also noticed that Trinity Lutheran Church, 691 4th Ave, is still listed as a tax exempt property, but I believe that that's a residence and business now.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hamilton. I also remember you asking about that. And I believe that has been, so BC Assessment has lots of sources to make their changes, one of which is land title adjustments, which is not done through the city. And I believe that one has been identified to be removed for this year. Again, still on our bylaw. So I think the end result will be the correct one. Yeah, but another removal that I missed. But when I submit, I'll be sure to confirm that with them.
All right, Councillor Nixon, and then we'll go back side.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Shoesmith. So the $41,000 is basically, I mean, we weren't getting any money from Holy Family, or no, we did get money from Holy Family last year. We didn't get any money from any of these others. So I'm still I'm a little confused by the $41,000 because we weren't getting any money from any of these anyways, right? So, yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Nixon. I was also confused by that.
Thanks, Councillor Nixon. You're correct with respect to the old fire hall site. And I think that's it. So we were receiving, last year we did receive tax revenue from these properties. So the community garden, that portion of the art station, the lot over there with the daycare, the fifth one was that. Anyway, so yeah, you're partially correct. And so, I mean, the 41,000 is just all 5 properties as a whole. Yeah. So if you were to remove I'd have to price out the lot over there and it's by itself to get you the number of change is, I believe, your question.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Ramadas, and then Councillor McIsaac.
I'm just going to say it out loud so that I understand this right. We were not getting any money till now. And if we continue to put them in tax exempt status, we won't get any money. However, if we don't put them in a tax exempt status, we get $41,000.
Not quite. Sorry, everybody just take a minute to think it through. Councillor McIsaac.
Okay, here's the way to think about it. I'm going to use a nice round number. Let's say we're collecting $1 million in taxes from everybody. If we take everybody out of the permissive tax exemption, we're still going to collect $1 million from everybody. But everybody that wasn't in the permissive tax exemption pool, their taxes will go down slightly to make up the $42,000 difference. We collect the same amount of money, doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter who's in or out of the permissive tax exemption. What matters is if they're in it, then they don't pay taxes. Everybody else pays a few nickels more to make up the difference of them over the whole year.
Thanks, Councillor McIsaac. That's a good segue for my question, actually, which was if this were spread out, what's the tax implication to the average household ballpark?
Yeah, 42K equals about $9 annually for the average Fernie single-family residential household.
Thank you. Further, Councillor Nixon?
And just following up on that, just curious about Appendix A for the permissive tax exemptions, how much overall? I mean, that's, you're not gonna be able to do that off the top of your head right now. Appendix A with all of the tax exempt properties that we have in the city of Fernie.
I can't answer that. I just need
You can't?
1 or 2 minutes. Yeah.
Oh, you're smart. You're smart. I know you're smart.
Well, he's doing that. Further questions, comments? Councillor Ramadas again?
I appreciate Councillor McIsaac's math tutorial there. Now it's clear in my head, finally. But I do still, I don't know if we have capacity to kind of have this conversation. It's the philosophy behind it, right? There's a bunch of institutions there, places of worship, completely get it. There's few more like a family housing society, completely get it. But there is a golf course also snuck into that list. Is it worthwhile for us to have that discussion whether those are legit institutions that provide community services that should get tax exemption? Like that's the thing that I kind of struggle with this. There's a multiple variety of institutions in that list. Places of worship I get, rest I don't know.
Thanks for that. That's very cogent, very serious, and I have the same set of misgivings, although I would kind of take a conservative lens to this. A lot of those are long-standing practices. And if we were to look at that, I think we would want to clearly telegraph well ahead of time that we would be doing so, as entire groups and ways of life have built up around that. Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Just following in that same train of thought around the discussion, do we actually have a written policy around who we provide tax exemptions, permissive tax exemptions for?
Thanks, Councillor Hamilton. No, we just follow the language in the community charter.
Councillor Audia Kelly.
Thanks, Your Deputy Worship. I think this question is for CFO. When we pass these, is it for the 10 years? Can it be altered during the 10-year time? How does that work? Can you, because you mentioned like, let's say the old fire hall site and it becomes a mixed use property. How do we differentiate or make changes?
Thanks, Councillor Audie Kelly. That particular property, I assume will have different zones eventually, some of which will be commercial, some of which will be residential. And once that happens, then BC assessment will start to assess all of them individually, and we'll have to bring it back to the bylaw, similar to the other affordable housing developments in town. They make up quite a sizable portion of the list as it is. And this, to answer Councillor Nixon's question, this is a very high level ballpark, but it's about 700,000 is what all of our permissive tax exemptions amount to for 2024. And then to touch on what Councillor Ramadas was talking about with respect to the golf course and other properties, next year is the year that this bylaw expires. And so part of this presentation next year will be going over each property on that bylaw, and then council will be deciding which they want to extend the exemption for 10 years for. So part of my prep for that presentation will be trying to dig up some history on why they were on that bylaw to begin with. And so council has a little more background to make that decision with.
Thank you, Director Burdett. Go ahead, Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm curious, I don't recall any time in the last couple decades, but I could be wrong. Has the city ever done any public outreach to ask the community about this? So I'd be curious to know in our community today, and while I feel reasonably confident about things like, you know, family housing and things like that, possibly even religious places and so on. But I'd be curious if we've ever done any outreach to the community, and if we have, what that looked like about permissive tax exemptions. Now, I will own the fact that it is a difficult question to ask. We've all gone through this several times, and we're still struggling to understand exactly what the repercussions are. So it would be understandable if it was challenging to communicate to the public, but it does feel like, since effectively what's happening is council is asking the rest of the community to shoulder some of the tax burden for some of these institutions and places and so on, because of the recognition of the greater public good that they provide, right? So we all acknowledge, yes, having this particular institution in our community yields a lot of benefit. The benefit is greater, presumably, than the amount of taxes that we would collect. And as a consequence, we're supporting that, and our whole community supports it. But I'd be curious to know if in the past, if we have, and if not, why not? And if we should in the future, do some public outreach and ask that question. And I realize this is a bit of a lift to the education, but to ask, what are the things that people think, what types of institutions, what types of places and so on, do people think in our community are worth the money, like worth shouldering that extra, $9, whatever. So I just want to put that out there, that I think that that's something that before we decide to start stroking things off the list, I would like to hear from the community what the values are, that whether or not something should stay on it or not.
Good point, Councillor McIsaac. I tend to lean the same, but were you waiting as well, Harshan?
I'll take this opportunity. I'll just,
okay.
I wasn't, but
Councillor Adi Kelly.
did I?
I thought you were,
Okay.
but I can hardly remember. I'm quite tired.
Yeah, just to be clear, I'm not anti-golf. Like, I enjoy golf, and yeah, it's just I'm really good.
Golf might not like you, but you like golf.
Yeah, my point was more around pretty much what Councillor McIsaac was saying, right? Like, what's the greater good to the community? That was my question. And just not knowing anything about the history, but just going through the list, it just feels like an ancient list, and the society looked different 80 years ago, and it probably reflects the same thing with a bunch of religious institutions, golf, another recreational activity. And so
You repeat yourself. All right, thank you, Councillor Ramadas. Thanks for your patience, Councillor Adi Kelly.
Thanks, Your Deputy Worship. Going further down Councillor McIsaac's road, I was thinking that we were of the mind to have been repeating our community survey every other year. So would it be prudent to try to do some public education in the meantime, and then to include in that survey those things that the community values enough to provide, basically to cover the cost of? Because did I hear you say $700,000? Thank you.
All right, Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. Apologize to Councillor Ramadas for playing for your golf game and for my golf game too.
All right, back to business, guys. That's good, but let's carry on. I think the consensus around the table is broadly, we don't want to pull the rug out from under anybody, but definitely we're relishing the prospect of going through this list next year. We have a recommendation. If somebody would like, no, Councillor Ramadas or McIsaac, whoever. Councillor Ramadas.
you're going through the list or going through the philosophy? Like that needs to be clarified.
I think it's both. I think we'll have to come up with the philosophy and then apply it to that list. Councillor McIsaac.
Well, knowing that we have a plan for doing that for next year, I'm happy to move the recommendation for this year.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hamilton. Discussion. All in favor? Thanks for that. Really in-depth discussion. I didn't see that one coming. That moves us along to, I believe, item 11.1. We have a report from our corporate officer.
Thank you, Council. This is just a brief presentation, no PowerPoint tonight. So I'm here to present a Remembrance Day policy for Council consideration. This policy will formalize the city's annual support for the Fernie Legion's Remembrance Day activities. Sorry, out of breath, but not allergies. That walk was enough. So in late August, the Fernie Legion submitted a letter requesting formal ongoing commitment from the city for our annually provided services. At this time, the city has no formal commitment with the Fernie Legion, and this means that every year the Legion is required to reach out to our parks, facilities, and recreation team, although each year we do prep ahead expecting that we are going to provide those services. So we're very happy to do so. And so annual support includes in-kind services for road closures, venue preparation, free equipment rentals, as well as waiver of the site fee. And the estimated cost is about $900 annually. And so I'm here to answer any questions council may have about the policy.
Councillor Ramadas.
I want to move this, Your Worship.
All right, seconded by Councillor Nixon. Discussion other than it's great? All in favor? It's done.
Thank you, Council.
That moves us right along to item 11.2, 2025 to 2029 financial plan. We have a report from the Director of Finance.
Thank you again, Deputy Mayor Shoesmith. I just have a few slides with a couple bullet points on each of the budget guidelines in your report. But before I start, the intent of this report and presentation and discussion really is just to inform council that, you know, we've started our internal prep for next year's budget, and these are the guidelines that staff are using to help guide us as we prep our work plans and put together numbers for council to see early next year for next year's budget bylaw. And so as I'm going through them, if there's any you'd like to discuss or change, please jump in. And again, the intent is just to provide staff with a kind of a council endorsed framework to use for us as to guide our initial planning. So guideline 1 talks about council strategic plan. As per last year, all departments are required to align their service programs and projects with council strategic plan. Guideline 2 is preparing our budget with inflation in mind, which when I wrote this report was about 2.9% according to BC CPI, which is not meant for us just to apply a flat 2.9% increase across the board. Staff does look at each line with intention to see where we can justify less increase or cost saving measures. Also, we do have separate agreements in place outside of CPI that stipulate different percentages of increase. It's also worth noting that several of our capital projects continue to come in at quotes way over budget, as council knows, which signifies even higher inflation in some of those areas. Guidelines 3 and 4 state that the upcoming budget is to be developed based on existing service and staffing levels. Any exceptions to these will be presented to council as an option to talk about during the budget presentations. With respect to these two guidelines specifically, the next budget report is going to be on November 26th. And at that meeting, my intention is to present a very draft tax rate increase based on the numbers I have available at the time, which will be based on existing service levels. And I just want to provide that to council early so that council can then have some discussion on their thoughts on whatever that percentage increase is looking like. And if they'd like to change staff's approach to budget prep at that time before, I want to provide that in November early before surprising council with it in February, that's the intent behind the next budget report.
Councilman Ramadez?
Thanks, Your Worship. I just wanted to kind of ask this question around service levels. Like, in what format are you going to present that CFO next month? When I think about service levels, I think about detailed view of how many hours of pool hours are there, or parks and recreation, things like those. Are we going to that level of detail? And not that I want to, but would be useful if there was a pre-read on that.
Thanks, Councilor Ramadez. I don't know if it'll be as detailed as hours of operation, but I guess my caution with respect to service levels is council will remember my last presentation a couple of weeks ago, which was on I can't remember what the report was about, but I was talking about apologies, I had it. Oh, it was the quarterly financial update. And I presented to council that 70 to 75% of our costs were based on 5 categories: labor and benefits, utilities, insurance, and so on. And so, I think what council will find if they decide that they want to alter our service levels is that even altering any service levels, it's really hard to save money because most of our costs is in salaries and wages. And so if we're, we can certainly discuss hours at the pool or hours at the arena to cut down on stuff. No, I know you're not picking out the pool. But the reality is that if we need to look at cuts, then we need to look at harder decisions like layoffs. And so I'm going to be presenting it that way to council more so than I am specific service levels.
Further from Councilman Ramadez?
I was about to ask about staffing, but CFO went and
read your mind.
He read my mind and used the L word. So sorry.
Yeah, and I don't mean to be doom and gloom, but there isn't going to be an easy lever that is available to council or staff to pull to save a 10% of taxes, or it doesn't work that way.
Again, Councillor Ramadez?
I just need an honest discussion, Your Worship. Even if we don't go that path, at least if the options are in front of us, we can make some good educated decisions.
That's understandable.
Yeah, thank you. And that's really the intent of tonight's report and the one in November, is to continue to bring this back for council to update as we go along, so that we heard feedback last year where it kind of felt like we were at the end, we were just dealing with this tax increase despite all the hours of budget presentation. So I'm really trying to bring this back as much as possible this year. And then the next guideline on this slide is efficiency. And council may remember last year's budget presentation, we had a couple of slides on specific things that we've done to make things more efficient with a cost value. So we'll be doing that again this year to show council what we've been working on with respect to this guideline. Community partners funding levels are to remain similar to 2024, except for those that have agreements already in place. And the library, and I'm going to start shifting the nomenclature around the library specifically a bit for council, because it's not really fair to call them a community partner, because if, you know, the library were to go under, that is a municipal service that we'll have to pick up and provide. So it's slightly different than our other true partners in the community. So I just wanted to point that out for council. And so with respect to the library, the mayor, Mr. Bornowski, and myself recently met with the library, and they demonstrated their challenges with their budget, given that they haven't received an increase in 3 years. And then before that received a decrease in 2021. So the starting point for them in our budget prep will be a 6% increase for 2025. And with respect to the library and the other 4 community partners, they're scheduled to present to council in the November committee of the whole, which will be mainly focused around their budget. And that was a timing change that we did this year so that council can hear from them before we do the meat and potatoes of our budget meetings.
Okay, I believe Councillor Adia Kelly has a question.
Thanks, Your Deputy Worship. CFO, for funding for the library, do we have any leverage, or do we have any also way to speak to the regional district about them increasing their funding to the library as well? The library is an essential service in the community, and they're providing much more than just lending books. They've become a place where families who are in conflict are meeting. It's become a warming center. It's become a place for new members to come and meet people, for people who are immigrants to come for resources. Like, it's become a youth hub. It's become so many things that I just, Emma and her staff are, to me, amazing of what they can do with what small budget they have. So if there is a lever for us to also ask the region to give them additional support, I'd like to know if that's something we can do.
Thanks, Councillor Adia Kelly. I can't speak to their process in terms of requesting funding from the regional district, so I'll leave that question specifically for their presentation as of committee. But what I will share is during that meeting, they brought a piece of paper that showed various libraries around the Kootenays and the province and their respective funding levels from the municipalities and the regional districts, and it was completely random. It seems like the levels of support all these libraries got, and so there is no rule in terms of how much municipalities and regional districts have to support. So I think that slide will be interesting during the November committee for council to see as well.
CIO?
If I may, I believe one of the avenues that would be beneficial for council if they wanted to go that route would be direct communication with the electoral area director. Sparwood has a library service, so does Elkford. There's regional library services that we directly support. Achieving a change in the service bylaw that provides the amount of funding that we receive would generally require some leverage, and you would want other directors on board with that kind of a change. And so I would recommend to council that open dialogue also occur with the elected officials for the electoral area and other directors at the regional district table. As it is a government to government, it's essentially effort.
Thank you, CIO. Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Speaking of government to government, I'm just wondering, I think Councillor Adia Kelly's coverage of the spectrum of work that gets done in the library building made me think, I wonder if there are perhaps different buckets of money that might be available from the province, considering that the library is a different kind of center. If it is an emergency, considered being an emergency usage center, for example, is there potentially money that we could be visiting on that? And I would just be, I guess my question to staff would be, have we looked at different potential offerings from other places with regards to different aspects that the library serves and beyond just book lending, for example, whether it's a youth hub or emergency warming center or et cetera.
Excellent points. Further or back to you, CFO?
Thank you, Council. Guideline 7 is regarding our contributions to reserves, and the idea is that they'll remain at same levels of 2024, noting again that they're still lower than what was recommended in the 2018 Asset Management Investment Plan. So also at that November 26th meeting, my intent is to present to Council a very base level 20-year reserve health projection to illustrate for Council just how big our infrastructure gap really is. And when I say base level, it's really just like replacement values of all of our assets and how that maps into our varying reserves. Like, we don't have data yet on like smaller assets within the bigger assets, you know, like we don't have facility plans that say replace the HVAC in 10 years yet. That was part of one of the projects in this year's budget. We had facility assessments that were to be done for some facilities. So we're still working on gathering the more data than we currently have. But so on the 26th, I will have at least that base level 20-year projection for reserves. And then at that time, you know, we can talk about if and how to start bridging that gap. You know, I expect it to be a shockingly large number in terms of dollar value.
Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. Is there any chance before that portion, CFO, if we can have a refresher on IICP and where we are in terms of priority, which ones have we done, which ones are yet to come? You know, I don't want to mix money thing with assets thing. You know what I mean? Like, I think it'll be a sort of a separate discussion in my mind.
Your Worship, I'd planned to work with our Director of Asset Management to bring information supporting a refresher on what the AMIP is and what the IICP is and what they tell us to the presentation of Committee of the Whole, but not a full analysis of works done over the past couple of years fleshed into that, just simply because as they're returning from a significantly long absence, I don't believe we have the capacity to get that done in time. But what Mr. Burdett has done is use the AMIP, the Asset Management Investment Plan data, and then is working with his team to adjust for inflationary costs. And so that will be able to provide an overview on the AMIP and the IICP and what they are. And we can touch on some of the implications, but a pretty significant assessment and then data analysis needs to be done to bring you what I agree Council also needs longer term. But we won't be able to do that for November. The intent was a refresher on those two plans and a reminder of what they say, the recommendations and what they mean, and then touching on some of the major works done since that time.
Thank you. And lastly, on this slide of particular note is the 297,000 that was used from the COVID restart, COVID Safe Restart Fund. And that was used to offset the pool's costs increasing back to pre-pandemic levels this year. And then, if Council remember, during last year's budget cycle, Council elected to use those restart funds to offset the cost of the pool, but kept the tax increase the same to essentially put that money into reserves. So Council will have the option to continue that increased contribution to reserves or not, but I just wanted to bring it up. And I apologize to you, Councillor Ramirez, because I think you tried to ask me about this 2 weeks ago, and I didn't clue in that you were asking me about this. So I apologize if I missed your question then. It was one of those things that woke me up at 4 a.m.
Things that wake accountants up at 4 a.m. scare me. Councillor Audia Kelly.
Thanks, Your Deputy Worship. I know this is a small, tiny amount of money, but the discretionary funds, as I recall correctly, we did not give them all out. So does that balance carry forward?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor McIsaac.
So just as a follow on to Councillor Audie Kelly's comment, we also, though, we're considering using those leftover funds for a second intake. And I don't know if you've ever approached that, but, and so they'll carry on if they don't do that. But I would still really like to bring forward the second intake at some point, just because of the timing for school groups and stuff. Yeah. Just a comment, Your Worship.
All right, back to the topic at hand.
Thank you. The next two guidelines are debt. First one's debt, which is expected to remain at consistent levels again. Obviously, we have payments to be made, so they will drop a little bit, but the expectation is that we don't quite expect to be taking on any more debt if the timing of some of our larger projects change, like the fire hall, just in terms of when our actual payments start. Then obviously we'll bring that back to council as part of the more in-depth budget presentations later this year. And then again, public consultation continue to be a focus throughout the budget process. We've got a few more meetings early on, and then our kind of our standard process that we did last year. And all budget meetings continue to be open to the public, and we'll do another open house probably in February alongside our annual budget at a glance document.
Councillor Audie Kelly had a question, I believe.
Thanks, Your Deputy Worship. Sorry, CFO. I just wanted to ask about, I believe this is our last payment for our 600, right? Can you just remind me what sort of tax dollar is funding, like what percent of tax it takes to fund that payment?
It's around 6.3%. Yeah, because 1% is equal to about 94,000 this year. Yeah.
And
So,
Councillor, oh, sorry, you can finish.
oh, I was just so that'll be a big topic in the 2026 budget for sure. What to do with that, whether it's pay for a fire hall loan or put it to reserves, and or you know, there's lots of options.
Very good. Thank you, Director Bird. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Acting Mayor Shoesmith, doing a great job. I just had a question about the public open house in February, and I always think that there's a disconnect with people that they don't really understand where the tax money is going. And I know that we looked into this a few years ago, and it's a tool, online tool called Balancing Act. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not, but it's it gives a receipt, a tax receipt. I was having a look at it today. It gives it a tax receipt about exactly where your, you know, $4 goes to the mayor's office, for example. I'm talking about the US, not Canada. It'd be like 10 cents or something like that to the mayor's office. But it's a really interesting tool, and it's I think that Castlegar used it as well. And it shows you if you want to, you know, decrease your hours at the pool, for example, you can decrease them and see what the, you know, what the taxpayer gets to see that, you know, relationship with the rest of the budget. And if you want to increase reserves, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just curious, you know, because it always seems to be, you know, that we have people come and they ask us questions. They're like, why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? So it'd be an interesting tool to show people as well. So just a comment more than a question, I guess.
Thanks, Councillor Nixon. I believe Councillor McIsaac has been waiting a little bit.
Oh.
That was you earlier a minute
Yes,
ago,
I did.
yes.
And we've kind of moved on, but I'm going to go back. I just want to clarify, and perhaps the CFO will tell me that I'm wrong, but it is my understanding that the debt that we've been paying out with regards to the Public Works building, we've been extracting that $600,000 from reserves. So in fact, we haven't actually been collecting the money for taxes for that payment. So it won't make a change other than we'll stop reducing the reserves at such a hemorrhaging rate.
Very, very good point, Councillor Ramadas.
Oh yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we reduced contributions to reserves to pay for that. Yeah.
No tax.
Councillor Ramadas.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just wanted to follow through with what Councillor Nixon was talking about in terms of education. I think we did a fairly good job last year. It was, yeah, sure, we can add yet another tool for people's information and education. Fully supportive of that. but the cynical in me tells me that no amount of education is going to change people's perception of where the taxes are. There's only so much the staff can do. So if if they can provide another tool with no extra effort, absolutely let them go ahead and do it. But I think where we were last February was fairly good. Any more education might get you one or two extra persons education a little better. So yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Ramadas. All right. Sorry to keep holding you up here, CFO.
That's okay. I mean, about balancing act, Mr. Bornowski had it on his screen here and it doesn't look free. So, I mean, so that's a consideration.
Good thing we have an accountant.
Yeah, I mean, I will reach out to the person from Castlegar to see what their thoughts were, because I love, yeah, I mean, there's a forum for people in my position. So it's easy as asking the question anyway. Yeah, thanks. And then the last guideline is around our non-market change and mine tax sharing revenue. Non-market change is the amount of new taxation arising from new construction during the year. Historically, as you know, the city has used this amount to lessen the burden on the current taxpayer, which is one way to do it. Some municipalities do it this way. Others put that money towards something else, whether it's to help with a big new project or put it in a reserve for future use. So the guideline is status quo, the treatment of these two things, but again, it will be presented to council for discussion during the in-depth budget presentations.
Councillor Ramadas.
Thanks, Your Worship. Any insight on how much SSMUH is contributing towards this at all?
No, not at this point. The non-market change hasn't even been released yet by BC Assessment, and then even when it is, I mean, I'll talk to the planning department when that happens. And yeah.
Councillor Nixon.
Thank you. I'm just curious about if we've heard anything about the mine sharing tax and from our partners, if there's going to be any changes or when we get renegotiated, because that the thought of that losing that money is quite terrifying.
Thanks, Councillor Nixon. The current agreement expires, I think it's 2035. So it's there until then, and as of right now, there's been no efforts to renegotiate yet.
All right, carrying on.
And so next steps, as I mentioned in guidelines 3 and 4, staff intends to bring a very draft initial tax rate increase in November. Also a 20-year reserve health projection for council, and then further discussion at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Burnett. As onerous as it seems, I think it's probably a good thing council is so engaged with the budget. That's not a bad thing. So we have a staff recommendation. If you would read that.
Yes, I have changed the tense slightly, that council support the proposed policy and guidelines to guide the development of the 2025-2029 financial plan.
Moved by Councillor Adia Kelly, seconded by Councillor McIsaac. Discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Which brings us to item 11.3, a report from the manager of planning.
Thank you, Council. Just bringing up the slideshow again, same process as before, hopefully a little bit quicker. Full disclosure on this presentation, this slideshow was done by the consultant, McElhaney, and I borrowed it present to council. So this is the same slideshow that they presented to staff when we were doing our review.
Must be good.
There we go. So as council and the community are aware, in the last few years, we've gone through a local government development approvals program process. McElhaney was a consultant that worked with us on that. And part of that process was through meeting with the development community, public and staff, was to develop a needs assessment for a permit tracking software. From that needs assessment, outside of the LGDAP work, but still closely related to it, McElhaney was retained to do a RFP, request for proposals, for software. So they used that needs assessment as their guide, and then brought forward the RFP. The reason for doing this process was to ensure that when we do commit to a software, it's something that we are going to be confident meets the city's and the building community's needs. So today I just wanted to go over the process that we followed and what we did to come to a recommendation on permit tracking software. There's a lot of information in the staff report as well. I'll brush over that, but again, more than open to questions and comments throughout. So there was the process that we did with the RFP when we received it. There was sort of a two-tiered review process. One was looking at those RFP responses and grading them based on how they met the criteria that was set in that RFP. That's the RFP response evaluation summary that you see in front of you. So through that process, we looked at several criteria. Pricing, vendor requirements, solution requirements, and implementation requirements. Pricing speaks for itself. Vendor requirements are how that vendor works, where they're situated, what they can do to support us in the software. Solution requirements are how their software matches what we want it to do. And then implementation, of course, is just moving forward with getting the software up and running with the city. As you see here, of the three software providers, Camino, Cloud Permit, and PSD citywide, Cloud Permit graded above in first place. And as a matter of fact, they were only second place in one subcategory, being that 3.0 implementation requirements. The second stage of our process was to actually have live demonstrations, which lasted for, I believe, 2 hours each. Essentially, we sent each of the three vendors a list of questions that you see in front of you there. And through their, showing us their software, answered those questions. And essentially, it was just a demo on, if you're an applicant, here's your beginning to end. And if you're the city working on permitting and inspections and things like that, here's your beginning to end. So very, very informative and a really thorough and good way to get to see the software and get a good understanding of how it worked. So again, with that scoring, Cloud Permit again rated above Camino and PSD. So each software had its strengths and weaknesses, but really overall, all three softwares were great. There's not really a whole lot to point out on the weakness side for any of them. I mean, they're listed there. Really, it was just more how we thought that the software worked the best for us. Cloud Permit on the strength side, I think, had very robust communication with the applicant through their program. So if there's a note on a file or something like that, or if someone looked at a drawing and needed it to be updated, there's an automatic sort of system that sends out notifications to that applicant and sort of a note-taking / communication back and forth to ensure that as the review process is happening, for example, everyone is kept in the loop and it's all date stamped and everything. So very robust and good. Another sort of value add, and this isn't something that we considered in grading the software. But once we graded the software, we kind of stepped back and we said, well, Cloud Permit came to the top, and an advantage of that is that Sparwood and Elkford also have Cloud Permit. So if you're a developer or a builder in the area, there'll be a familiarity in that, and that'll help with that change management portion of things as well. So overall, obviously, if Cloud Permit won both categories, Cloud Permit won overall. So the RFP response was worth 60%, and the demonstrations were worth 40%. Cloud Permit had a score of 85.1, opposed to 75.1 for PSD and 73.9 for Camino. And speaking to that, I know I touched on the budget a little bit. It was one thing that we were actually pleasantly, I shouldn't say surprised, but it was nice to see that our estimated $50,000 budget for software this year actually paid for this entire RFP process, and will pay for the implementation and first year of the software as well. We think there's a little bit of a surplus there. There's one cost, the cost to integrate our systems, that once we sit down and talk to Cloud Permit, they'll be able to actually figure that cost out. So that the price in the staff report is actually the high end of that. I think it's $4,050 or something like that. It could be much lower, so we could actually come in quite a bit under budget. With that said, the capabilities that we asked Cloud Permit for, or asked the vendors for in the RFP, were based on our development permits, building permits, planning and development related things. They also have modules for bylaw and business licensing as well, which could be advantageous to us to look into in the future, moving forward. So again, we're not committed to those yet, but we've had internal discussions, and we think that could be a real possibility to really help to streamline that end of things as well. So our recommendation tonight is that council make a resolution to move forward with Cloud Permit as a successful software provider. And then we will be hopefully up and running with them in a few weeks' time to move forward with implementation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ramadas.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just a broad question here. Like, once you have the software in your hand, how will your day look like compared to before?
Yeah, great question. I think overall, from a day-to-day basis, as we've talked about before, a lot of our processing of permits is a back and forth with the applicant to get that complete application. And again, we've said it before, that's a little on us and a little on them, and that the information isn't necessarily there to know what a complete application is. But there's that sort of back and forth. So I think a lot of that will be streamlined and automated, which is excellent. So that'll save time. And so what I picture us being able to do, I've said for a long time that we've been working in a broken system, or an old one that just doesn't meet our needs anymore, but we're too busy working within that system to actually fix it. So here we are fixing the system. Now we'll be able to work with something that's a little more streamlined and be able to focus on more long-term planning, policy-based things to help move the city forward. I mean, a really good example of that is OCP implementation, and along those lines, focusing on small-scale multi-unit housing or the housing crisis, and those types of big picture items that will hopefully be able to focus on more of a day-to-day basis rather than being caught up in the current planning all the time.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, but actually, Mr. Simulini answered my question in the process of answering Councillor Ramadas's questions.
Very well. Councillor Audia Kelly.
Thanks, Your Deputy Worship. I just wanted to ask if you know, like, with AI coming on, and possibly chatbots, like kind of like what Kelowna has, does that kind of stuff integrate into Cloud Permit, or is that something that we wouldn't be valuable? I guess I'm saying, I'm sorry. not very well.
One, through to Councilor Kelly, I remember a pretty wholesome discussion around chatbots at one point in time. Yeah, I don't know what the capability is at this point for AI. I can say though that over the past several years, this software has come a long ways. I know when Sparwood first brought them on and we first started looking at vendors, a lot of them were just based on building permit applications, and now there's modules for development permits and bylaw and business licenses and things like that. So they really seem to be evolving and changing with the times. So I mean, I'm assuming that as it continues to improve, that those will be available. I mean, something ideal would be like, is there a software that can help us to review plans without having to review them all by hand, things like that. So again, no comment. I don't have a comment on if we can do that right away, but I would hope that something like that would happen in the future.
CAO, and then
If I may, only because of work that I have on the go with some colleagues on the coast, we've been looking at different implementations of AI chatbots in building and development supports. And generally they're a custom built, locked in, essentially chatbot that lets you interrogate your bylaws and your policies, and they layer on top of your website. So it's that little chat button that you see whenever you try to contact a human and you need support, but for your bylaws. And then underneath that is the application software. So as you work on any page on a website, typically it's just an overlaid chatbot that knows about the bylaws underneath that you're locked into, meaning it integrates with your core website and would just sort of float on top of whatever piece you're working on. That's how Kelowna has it implemented. They have a strong walled AI for this one specific purpose built around their bylaws, so you can chat and interrogate the bylaws. And then they have their online application and permit tracking. Those are these types of applications to take the actual intake of materials.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks, EAO.
Thank you. In the report, you talk about if this goes ahead and is approved, starting a pilot program. I'm just curious if you could kind of elaborate on what that looks like.
Yeah, through to Councillor Hamilton, the pilot program itself is once council makes a resolution, and that's where the if comes from. Ultimately, the decision lies in your hands, council. But we will sit down and talk with Cloud Permit and their group. Implementation with the city systems and staff training and all that is sort of, they have a really good grasp on that. But we want to have a talk with them about how we think that change management side would work with the development community and the best way to proceed. We have talked about like a pilot program where we get a builder, or for example, the Canadian Home Builders Association on board with us and sort of pilot it with a couple different builders in town. And then they would be able to provide like a critique of how it's working, because the software is pretty customizable. So if there's any issues or anything that really doesn't make sense to them, then we can work on it and make sure that we're where we want to be before we go live.
The follow-up? Yep.
Just as a follow-up to that, I'm curious if we would consider bringing on board Joe Public, for lack of a better term, the individual who's going to be doing like a deck themselves, or kind of a sole individual builder, just for that, user interface and experience perspective, as opposed to focusing it solely on the professional builder community.
Yeah, through to Councillor Hamilton, that's a great idea. I know I spoke with Sparwood a couple of years ago when they were first bringing Cloud Permit in. And one thing that they did to sort of get everyone up and running was it took a little bit of time and some capacity, but they had sort of that if you're Joe Public, so to speak, and you're coming into City Hall and you don't know how to use the program, or you've had problems with it, they had their staff trained to actually sit down and go through the system with the person to help them put their application into the program. So that sort of helped train them too. That being said, if you're only applying for one permit in your lifetime, then that doesn't make a lot of sense. But I think as far as that pilot program, bringing somebody on that isn't necessarily making applications all the time might be a good step forward.
Councillor Ramadas?
Thanks, Your Worship. I just was wondering, can you just copy paste from Sparwood's experience? Bring the guy who was implementing there, bring them on here, do it instead of running a pilot? Or am I oversimplifying it?
Sorry, Councillor Ramos, just for clarification, are you just asking if we just go live right away rather than doing a pilot? Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the conversation we have with Cloud Permit. But I can reach out to the other communities that have it to see how they did it. Again, I know that Sparwood sort of had that period of hand-holding with people that weren't quite sure how to use it. I don't know if they piloted it first, but I can reach out to see how it went and how that went forward.
Follow up?
One more thing that I've kind of harassed you guys every quarter when we get that building permit report. Can I expect that next quarter we'll have turnaround times also shown there?
Yeah, through to Councillor Ramadas, it's a good question and not one that was completely unexpected. It's all good. So no, I think that an important part of this and an important part of looking at how this software is going to be working is obviously once the software is up and running, those turnaround times are going to be automatically calculated, right? Like there's date stamps for everything, so we can actually look at again that chess clock of how the back and forth and what our timelines are. But I think an important part of reporting back to council is actually getting that baseline of where we're at now. So I mean, it is a lot of work using the system we have right now to actually calculate those timelines, because each application is unique and there is so many different things that happen with them. But I think even pulling a healthy sample of applications that we have and reporting back to council on those timelines, how long the city had something on their desk versus how long the applicant had, and the total timeline, that sort of thing. It's good for council to know, and it's also really important for us to know, because then we have something to compare to when we have the software up and running.
Councillor Audia, Kelly. Oh, yep. Finish up. Yep.
Just to be clear, Mr. Similiani, you're getting this next quarter, or is it too early?
It's something that we need to work on, and essentially, like, again, it's a lot of work, so it's a capacity thing, right?
CAO.
Thank you. Through to council. There's a proposed schedule for implementation starting on page 294 up to 295 for cloud permits development and building permit solution implementation. It's essentially a 3-month process of going through kickoff, a little bit of integration work, data import, configuration testing, and then go live for each of the modules. And so just because it does have to integrate with a number of platforms, there's like real testing and real modeling and then real user testing and a build out. So it's going to be, I would say, late February, probably before it's go live in the community based on this schedule. And that might have been intended to actually start this month. So it might be just into March before we're go live with this platform. And in the meantime, what Mr. Similini said holds steady, but there is a good implementation schedule that was included in Cloud Permit's proposal.
And further to that, Mr. Barnowski, our goal for go live, I know, like we talked about the timelines and bringing those forward. That's one thing we'll work on. And again, we want to have that for when we're up and running. But our goal for go live is to be have everything ready to go for everyone heading into the 2025 building season.
Thank you for your immense patience, Councillor Audia Kelly.
Thanks, Deputy Worship. Just to clarify, 2 things. Just to clarify, were you meaning to get that sample of baseline now, Councillor Ramadas, like time? Were you meant like actually going live?
All of it.
All of it. Okay. Gotcha. On that
word's
note,
an anathema to planners. You know that, right?
yeah, that sounds scary. But on that note, I would like to move that we authorize staff to finalize and award the contract for the City of Fernie's development and permitting software to Cloud Permit.
Is there a seconder? Councillor McIsaac. Motion seconded. Further discussion? All in favor?
Thank you, council.
Thank you. And moving forward, we have notice of motion, but I don't think there's any notices of motion. It's just there. Okay. And we've got 14.1, the bear hazard assessment from Fernie Wildlife Advisory Committee. Well, seen that. And 14.2, the request for letter of support. I was out of the office when this came in, so I actually missed this email here. Should I read this? Or just give it a synopsis, do you guys think? Okay, long story short, there was some email back and forth. It's actually fairly short here. So I am writing on behalf of Wild Wapiti Play School, and we are looking for letters of support to accompany our application to the provincial $10 a day childcare program. The application deadline is October 31st, so hoping you or someone else at the city can address our request. See below. Thank you kindly, Danielle Marcotte. And yeah. Oh, give me a second to suss out where this is. Yeah, I'll just read it. It's not that long. Dear Mayor Milligan, I hope this message finds you well. My name is Danielle, and I'm a co-founder of Wild Wapiti Play School Society, a nonprofit child care center serving the families of Fernie. We are currently applying for the provincial $10 a day program, which would enable us to provide more affordable child care options to the families in our community. As part of our application, we require letters of support from community leaders who understand the importance of accessible and affordable child care. Given the positive impact this program would have on our families, I'm reaching out to kindly request a letter of support for you as Mayor of Fernie. Your support would greatly strengthen our application, demonstrate the community's commitment to supporting our families. If you are so willing, I've outlined 3 key talking points. Okay, right. No, this makes sense here. I think everybody gets the gist. Councillor McIsaac.
2 things. One, well, I certainly support getting more play school and daycare and so on. What's the impact to the community for supporting it, if anything?
I don't see any downside from signing this letter of support. Does anybody?
And then my second question, and Deputy Mayor, if I may, is the only thing that I was kind of curious about with regards to the letter, which I would support, is speaking to the quality of care. I'm not sure that we can do that unless there is someone who can actually directly speak to that. As far as impact on the community of available play school and daycare and so on and successes, I feel fairly comfortable with that, but I'm not sure if we can speak to the quality. So I don't know how important that is to the letter of request.
Councillor Audia Kelly.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor McIsaac, because I had the same concern because not being a ECE, early childhood educator, I don't know. And then also, can we speak to their success as an organization? Well, I don't really know that. I mean, I know it's extremely important that we have childcare spaces. But
I think
we'd need some help, I think, with those other points.
I think the city as an institution is kind of blind to these sort of things. It's not something where we pay attention to, measure, or care too much about, other than that we would love more daycare. Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. What I would propose is that if council is amenable, that we agree in principle to a letter of support for this particular organization. Perhaps a phone call is necessary to ask how important those particular items are in the letter. So if we want to speak in general terms about the necessity of having affordable daycare in our community, I feel like council can probably address that particular item. I feel comfortable that somebody could write about that. If it's what I would like to know is if it is very important to their application that we speak about the quality of care they provide, then we might be at a loss.
Yes.
So I would propose that we approve a letter of support for them in their application, but we need to communicate that with them to ask how important those particular items are in the letter, or if it could be a general, the importance of $10 affordable daycare in our community is paramount, and that's how we're keeping families from having to move away and all that sort of thing.
Do you think you could wordsmith something that, CAO?
If I may, through your worship, the letter of support is a specific requirement for the $10 a day program. as they have been operating for less than 4 years, I believe this is the newer childcare. This is a newer a letter of community support is required. The actual contents of the letter is not specified by the province, so I do not know that the society will actually be able to usefully answer those questions. Having now worked with the Ministry of Education and Childcare New Spaces Fund and $10 a day plan, I also believe that the ministry itself, especially during the interregnum, would have a real challenge in telling you or them the relative importance of any of those, and would recommend that if council wishes to support it, that a resolution that council provide a letter of support for their application would be sufficient. And then our corporate officer could work with the acting mayor to complete that and add a signature and send it off to them by deadline.
More or less. Go ahead, corporate officer.
As the person who writes the support letters, I'm happy to take direction from council to make sure that we are speaking towards council strategic priorities, OCP, the importance of childcare in our community. In this request, it said, if you are so willing, they have outlined 3 key points. So like our CAO had said, I don't think it's a necessity for their application. I think it's a nice to have. So I'd be happy. I have a proposed resolution if council would like to hear it, and definitely in writing the letter, take that direction from council to keep it to those specific items.
Very well. Councillor Hamilton?
I'd like to hear the resolution.
Yes, myself as well.
That council provide a letter of support for the Wild Wapiti Play School Society for their application to the provincial $10 a day care program.
Moved by Hamilton, seconded by Ramadas. All in favor? There we have it. And that brings us to the final item, reports from council members. I'm feeling capricious, so it's going to be random. We'll start with Councillor Nixon.
I've been away. I have nothing to report. I'm looking forward to tomorrow night and the next night for the chamber.
You look well rested and happy. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. I'll make up for Councillor Nixon's brevity. Number of things since the last time we had the opportunity to report, and I'm sure I will miss out on a number of them, but I did participate in some follow-up meetings from AKBLG, with AKBLG from the advocacy that we did at UBCM. We will be following up with the various ministers. However, we are currently waiting to see who they might be to follow up on those advocacy items that were brought forward as priorities at the AKBLG resolutions. I attended the ceremony on October 17th for the arena tragedy. As well, I also just recently attended my first board liaison meeting to one of the points that Councillor Adia Kelly made earlier. The breadth and depth of services that the library provides this community is mind-boggling, to be quite frank. Some stats that I was given were that their program attendance over the last year has increased by over 10%. The unique users of audiobooks has increased by over 30% to, I don't have the actual number here, but it's something like 4,000 individuals. As well, the use of their public computers has increased by over 100% in the last year. Excuse me, just in the last year, and that's now sitting at about 3,000 unique users. So, just to think about the impact that building and those services has on that many people in our community and surrounding areas is just goes to show how well they have been operating and managing that building and that facility. A couple things as well for the community to consider. They're always looking for new trustees. So if that's something that you are interested in sitting on their board of trustees, check out their website. They've got all of the information to be a trustee there. Some upcoming events that they have for the community are Christmas by the Book. I do believe you are familiar with that, Deputy Mayor Shoesmith, having read at the event last year to some children. Mayor Milligan was there as well. They also have their Books and Beats event coming up, which is a combination of books and cooking culinary lessons. I believe Councillor Ramadas was involved in the one just recently, a week or two ago. And also they have a new tech hub opening up on November 7th, which will be quite a fascinating space. Again, adding to the services and usability of that space. There will be everything from 3D printers and 3D scanners, sewing and repair, podcast and vlog materials. Like, it's going to be a very cool little tech hub for our community. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Houth, and good stuff. Councillor McIsaac. I'm keeping it random. Yeah.
Okay. Microphone. I have not been quite as busy as Councillor Hamilton. I did attend the RDK last board meeting as Mayor Milligan is away. Lots of interesting things going on there. One of the things I wanted to say was I really wanted to give a shout out to our Area Director, Thomas McDonald, for his championship for the Fernie Valley Pathway Phase 2 that's coming up. He's an excellent representative for that area, and it's going to be great for our community when that gets completed. I was lurking also in some of the AKBLG meetings, and I'm knee deep in planning for the next AKBLG AGM in Radium. So looking forward to that. Also looking forward to the Chamber Awards dinner on Thursday night. So
very good. Yeah. Councillor Ramadas.
I have nothing to report, Your Worship, but I do have one question to Councillor McIsaac.
Shoot.
Is it possible to bring AKBLG to Fernie?
Ooh. Not only possible, but it has happened. Yeah, I want to say 2015. Yeah. But I could be wrong. It is a bit challenging. We are very limited in our ability to put that many people in one conference room space. So it's been a bit challenging. It's also a little bit challenging in Radium too, because kind of the accommodations are spread out a little bit. So is it possible? Yes.
Right on.
I'll add just one more thing, Your Deputy Worship, if I may, and that is the one consideration to take into is the conference does try to alternate between East and West Kootenays each year. So we're actually back in Radium again because they got what? Oh, Kimberly. Yes. Oh, thanks. Oh. Thanks for staring at me like that. Kimberly following because there was a skip of Radium. Right. So we ended up with going back to Radium and then to Kimberley, but it'll go back to West next year. So the earliest it could potentially be is 2 years from now.
Sure, why not?
Yeah. So
he's just giving in now.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about the economic activity and the opportunity for us to host this event and probably bring in some revenue for our local businesses here. What will it take in terms of preparation? It's actually a good problem to have that the next AKBLG that we can potentially host is 2 years out. Could we do something between now and 2026 to make that happen?
I'm going to play the I'll get back to you card. Yeah. So I've not worked through the process previously of deciding locations, and that's just because it's been so interrupted throughout the COVID and all that stuff. So I haven't had the opportunity in AKLBG to see how that decision-making process is done. Let me ask.
This is interesting, but it is sideways to where we are going with the meeting here. So back on track with Tracy Audia-Kelly.
I do like your thinking, Councillor Ramadas. And
me too.
Like Fieldhouse. Yeah. Just saying. So I, I have been attending the Fernie tourism meetings. I don't have a lot of things to report from that, other than that they are looking at a study for recreation in the area, and of course continue to do the good work that they do promoting Fernie as a destination. Myself and his deputy worship had the pleasure of interviewing youth counselor candidates. And I just want to say, I think we have an amazing new youth counselor. And I want to say that all of the youth were incredible youth. We have, like, it makes me feel good about the future, knowing some of the youth that we have in Fernie and what great leaders they are. And I think we scored one of those great leaders to be our youth counselor. I don't know if I need to bring a notice of motion for this one, but I'm going to throw out there that I would really like to see us do nothing elaborate, like a little bit of a temperature check with folks about how organics is going in the new year. Because I think we need some time for it to run, but something simple like a SNAP survey or a Survey Monkey, you know, are they filling their bin? Because I'm hearing from people, they're not really filling their bin, even if they have a big family and maybe they don't need weekly organics. Maybe it could be bi-weekly. So I'm not sure if I need to bring a notice of motion that we do something on Let's Talk, like just a little, how are you finding organics thing? Yeah. And I also attended the remembrance on of our tragedy. And I think that it's extremely important that we keep remembering that we lost lives here in town, and that we make it part of our corporate culture to borrow from tech, everyone going home safe every day. I would, that's so important for our own staff. And I'm really looking forward to the rest of the events this week that we'll be attending tomorrow night with some of our partners and the Chamber Awards. And thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Audia Kelly. And that brings me to, if you have anything to say, Ms. Becker, now is your chance. Welcome to the council.
Hello, thank you so much for having me at the council meeting tonight. I'm super grateful and appreciative to be here. I've definitely learned a lot tonight. I've never been to a council meeting or anything like it before, so I've definitely learned a lot, and nothing to report as it's my first, but I do plan to do a lot with this position, and I've started to brainstorm ideas to bring to council, and I'm super excited to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. Still excited after all that boring meeting stuff we just did. That's why we picked you. On that topic, yeah, so I was part of that committee that looked after that, and I gotta say, I did it for entirely selfish reasons. It really restores my faith in humanity to see a really good crop of young future go-getters, and I feel bad about each one that we didn't pick, because they were all worthy candidates, and I think just the fact they exist made me feel a lot better about the future. I regret that I was unable to attend the memorial for our workers. I had some concrete responsibilities that day, but I actually was working on that job the days leading up to that, and in the aftermath with those guys. And it is a tragedy. I think I saw them the day before they passed, and it kind of is a little humbling and saddening. On a lighter and better note, I was able to attend the Veterans Appreciation Dinner, and I gotta give a real shout out to the members of the Legion and our veterans. We have quite the interesting and fun crop of veterans here. I really had a great time having dinner with them, and it was definitely an honor for me to have been there. Yeah, that's about all. I'm looking forward to our regional government meetings here tomorrow night, and to our awards on Thursday. That's going to be a lot of fun. That's everything. So with that, I believe we can move on and adjourn the meeting. Oh, no, you're not.
Are we going back to the playground after the Montane bylaws? So we're going to revisit it after the 10.1, that's what.
Oh, my God. Yes, my bad. I kind of wondered why you stayed around for such a beefy meeting. I'm not actually sure what the procedure for this would be, so bear with me while I consult with corporate officer.
So council did not make a resolution to add it on further down in the agenda. So should council wish to discuss it now, we could make a motion. Let's not disrupt the rules. To suspend the rules, to make an amendment to the agenda to revisit a specific topic, but we would have to make that resolution now, and I can write it down and then say it to you in better English if you so wish.
Thoughts, Councillor McIsaac?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. When I was recommending that we wait until after that discussion with regards to the changes to the Montane zoning, part of that, the intention behind that is we're going to want to know what the impacts of those changes are before we make decisions about changing where city-owned property and all that stuff is. So I don't know that we received enough information so far. I mean, we're going to probably have to look to staff here in the future to go, once those plans for how that's going to lay out, whether that's trail connections, which I think is something that Mr. Simulini mentioned possibly earlier, like we're going to need to know that information before we're going to be able to go back to looking at whether or not that particular piece of property can be changed over a playground. So while I'm keen on playgrounds and I think there should be a playground there and all that stuff, I don't know that we know what the future of that area looks like yet from the information we had tonight to make that decision yet. So I would suggest that we not make a decision on that and wait till we get more information back about what the changes are going to be. And then at that point, if necessary, we can communicate to Mr. Wiebe that that particular area might be up for a change or not, or communicate, sorry, it's not going to be. Does that seem reasonable? Further
thoughts from the table here?
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going when I was saying about the impacts. I concur with Councillor McIsaac. I think we need more info.
Very well. I thought you were just a local government aficionado. You have my sincerest apologies.
No, we just the discussion was to revisit it after with the motion. It was my understanding. So what would you like from me? What can I bring back to the table to move forward with this project?
First of all, I'm not sure we should be in the
No, it's not actually proper to have somebody interject into a meeting. So what I would say is, please send us all another email. We'll talk. It might show up on the agenda. I will get back to you. Yeah. Thank you very much. Sorry to drag you through all that. And with that, CAO.
Acting Mayor, if I might, given council is having a discussion at the table, and I'm likely to follow up with the with Mr. Wiebe, who presented as a delegation, I would like, just on behalf of staff, one small piece of clarification. When you're talking about looking for additional information, you're talking about looking for additional information that would come in as further steps in the Montane master planning process to define trail connectivity and park connectivity, not necessarily additional information from Mr. Wiebe at this time. And then once you have that additional information from the landowner developer that would form part of a master plan and then be amended into an OCP, that would trigger the re-engagement. I'm paraphrasing what I think my understanding is, but I'd like to be able to follow up appropriately post-meeting. And so it's just a clarification from council on their earlier discussion.
That sounds correct to me.
That's what I meant. When I
yes, that's very well. Yeah. My apologies all for the inexperience of your chair. And that moves us on to the final item, which is adjournment. I don't think I have to ask for a motion for that, do I? No, I can do this. And this, I believe, is the final time I have this honor.